The first sound is a distant, industrial roar, the kind that feels alive. Machines pounding, furnaces breathing, steel screaming as it bends into shape. Then the noise cuts sharply, replaced by the hushed echo of a German war room. Several officers stand frozen around a long table, staring at a freshly delivered American production chart. The numbers look unreal, almost absurd, as if typed by a man who had lost his senses. 60,000 aircraft a year. One officer breaks the silence with a strained whisper, insisting it must be propaganda, because no nation on earth can build machines at that pace. Another studies the report longer, his confidence quietly fading as the implications sink in. The room grows heavier, as if the walls themselves can sense the shift. What began as a simple document now feels like a warning. And in that moment, Germany glimpses a distant engine awakening, an industrial giant preparing to reshape the war. The story steps back to 1942, a year when Germany still believed momentum was on its side. The Reich Chancellery war room hums with quiet confidence, its walls covered with vast maps marked by sweeping arrows across Europe and deep into the Soviet Union. Officers move with disciplined precision, convinced their victories prove the Reich's unstoppable rise. To them, the United States remains a distant, fractured nation, soft, unfocused, and unprepared for a prolonged fight. When a new report arrives, suggesting American industry is shifting into full wartime production, most barely glance at it before dismissing it outright. They argue that a country of civilians cannot turn factories overnight, that experience cannot be replaced with enthusiasm, and that any real scale would take years. Time, Germany believes it already controls, yet beneath the surface of their confidence lies a subtle crack, a sense that the war is expanding beyond familiar borders. The contrast grows sharper as triumph blinds them to the warning signs gathering across the Atlantic. In this room of certainty, no one wants to imagine that a distant nation they underestimated might soon become the greatest threat they will ever face. The next briefing arrives without ceremony, yet its weight is felt the moment it hits the table. The document is thicker than usual, its pages filled with precise figures, factory coordinates, and detailed production summaries gathered from fresh intelligence. As the officers begin reading, the usual murmur of confidence fades into an uncomfortable quiet. The numbers are not predictions, they are not theoretical. They represent the current American output, shipyards doubling in size, assembly lines producing aircraft by the hour, and tank factories expanding with a speed that defies German expectations. One general, unable to contain his disbelief, slams his fist onto the table and insists the Allies are exaggerating, that no nation can outproduce an entire continent at war. His voice echoes through the room, but no one answers. A younger officer, studying the fine print, finally breaks the silence with a softer, more unsettling truth. They already are. The words settle over the group like a cold shadow, challenging every assumption they've relied on since the war began. Eyes shift back to the report, each line unraveling the illusion of Germany's industrial superiority. And as the final page is turned, the first flicker of panic begins to take shape, faint yet unmistakable. At first, the senior leadership refuses to accept what the reports imply. Denial becomes their shield, and they cling to it fiercely. They insist that German engineering, precision-built, battle-tested, technologically superior, will overcome whatever crude mass production the Americans attempt. In their minds, craftsmanship will triumph over quantity. Yet even as these arguments echo through the war room, the reality unfolding across the ocean tells another story. The narrative shifts to American factories, alive with motion, where rows of B-17 bombers glide down assembly lines with mechanical rhythm. Liberty ships rise from steel skeletons to seaworthy vessels in mere days. Each one, a symbol of a nation, accelerating into a war it never wanted, but was now fully prepared to win. Tanks roll out of sprawling plants without pause, their engines tested under the glow of midnight floodlights. Back in Berlin, the contrast grows impossible to ignore. Officers study side-by-side comparisons of their own production capabilities. Factories bombed into rubble, shortages of steel and fuel tightening like a noose, and supply chains stretched thin across conquered territories. Every chart reveals a widening gap that no amount of faith in technology can close. Yet, leaders continue speaking with a tone of forced confidence, masking the dread rising behind their eyes. They insist victory is still within reach, even as the numbers say otherwise. In that uneasy blend of pride and fear, Germany confronts a truth it can no longer outrun. The enemy is not just building weapons. The enemy is building momentum. The truth arrives not through charts or intelligence memos, but through the battlefield itself. Reports from the Eastern Front describe American tanks reappearing on the line only days after being destroyed, their numbers growing instead of shrinking. Commanders in France note the same unsettling pattern. Units they believed shattered return fully equipped, reinforced, and supported by columns of fresh vehicles stretching beyond the horizon. Downed American pilots, expected to be out of the war for good, are found back in the skies weeks later, flying new aircraft identical to the ones they lost. It feels less like fighting an army, and more like fighting a factory that never sleeps. In the war room, these accounts spread across the table like a grim mosaic. Germany's officers study the growing mountain of evidence, watching the imbalance unfold in real time. Fuel shortages choke their own movements. Replacement tanks arrive slowly, sometimes months late, sometimes not at all. Ammunition stocks dwindle, supply lines strain. Every measure of strength they once relied on now bends under pressure. A senior general finally breaks the silence with a line that cuts through the room. We are fighting a nation that replaces in 1 month what we lose in a year. No one challenges him. No one can. In that moment, Germany understands the imbalance is no longer a temporary setback. It is a verdict. Fear hardens into inevitability, and the war's trajectory becomes painfully clear. It becomes clear that America's true strength isn't found in any single machine, but in the system that creates them. German officers, now desperate to understand the scale confronting them, study captured reports detailing how US factories operate. They see assembly lines built on absolute standardization, where every bolt matches every thread, and every tank part can be swapped without hesitation. Repetition, not customization, drives the rhythm. What once seemed like crude manufacturing now reveals itself as strategic brilliance. In contrast, Germany's own designs, ingenious but intricate, require skilled labor, rare materials, and time they no longer possess. The realization settles heavily among the leadership. Their nation had entered the war believing speed and decisive victories would secure dominance before opponents could mobilize. But America had prepared for the opposite. A long war, sustained by organization, logistics, and an industrial machine that grows stronger the longer it runs. The emotional tone shifts from disbelief to a quiet, painful recognition of strategic failure. Two philosophies stand exposed: Germany's built on rapid conquest, America's on patient endurance. And in that comparison, the Germans finally understand why they are being overtaken by a nation whose greatest weapon is efficiency itself. By 1944, denial has nowhere left to hide. German cities burn night after night, their factories reduced to twisted steel and shattered brick. What production remains is a fraction of what it once was, starved of fuel, labor, and hope. Meanwhile, the American juggernaut only accelerates. Reports describe thousands of new bombers already completed, with thousands more scheduled, and shipyards launching vessels so quickly that Germany can scarcely believe the figures. In the dim light of the war room, the leadership studies the numbers in defeated silence. The weight of them fills the air like smoke. At last, a general exhales and speaks the sentence they have all avoided. This is not an army, it is a machine, and we are being crushed beneath it. No one argues, no one even moves. In that moment, arrogance finally dies, replaced by the cold acceptance that the war was lost not in the fields of Europe, but in the factories across the ocean that never stopped building. In the end, the camera pulls back from the war rooms and burning cities to reveal a quieter, broader truth. Germany was not defeated by a single battle or a single general, but by a nation it once dismissed as lacking the will to fight. America's real power came from unity, planning, and an industrial force that could replace every loss and still grow stronger. The lesson settles with somber clarity. Wars are won not only by brilliance, but by endurance and preparation. Germany feared American weapons. What they should have feared was America's unmatched ability to build them.